After more than a year of bloodshed, a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas appears close. Outgoing US President Joe Biden said an agreement was on the brink. The deal would see Israel remove its troops from the most populated parts of Gaza in return for the gradual release of Israeli hostages. A Palestinian official has told the BBC that the terms of the deal were being finalised, with negotiations continuing in Qatar, both sides working in the same building for the first time. Let's speak to Emir Nadar, our correspondent in Jerusalem. So, Emir, talk us through again the main planks of this agreement, if indeed it goes ahead.
So what we understand from a Palestinian official who's been talking to the BBC is that there would be a first initial stage of around 6 weeks where Israeli hostages that are being kept in Gaza would be exchanged with Palestinian prisoners who've been kept in prisons in Israel. Now, that would also happen as Israeli troops begin to withdraw from some of the main population centres, cities in Gaza, and Palestinians who've been displaced throughout the Gaza Strip would be able to begin to return home. Whilst that's happening, a second stage of negotiations would be going on, perhaps a more critical stage where negotiations would be taking place to guarantee the second phase where a permanent ceasefire and a full withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip would take place. And that is an element of the negotiations which is more tricky, and for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he's facing pushback from even some members of his own cabinet here in Israel who don't want that to happen.
Yes, with that pushback, what does it mean for him politically? Can he go ahead with the deal in spite of that kind of pushback?
Yeah, well, we've heard in the past few hours from two of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet ministers who are seen to be more of the radical flank of his government. One of them this morning calling on his colleague to resign if this ceasefire deal goes ahead, calling it a surrender deal. They want the war to continue. They want to defeat Hamas. They also, one of them wants to resettle, to establish Israeli settlements in Gaza. If they do pull out of the coalition, it could lead to the government being a minority government. It could collapse. It would make life very difficult for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Thanks
very much indeed, Emir Nadar there. Well, let's speak to Fawaz Judges, Professor of International Relations at the London School of Economics. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Now, we've been at the point where it's close in the past. How confident are you that this time round a deal will be reached?
Correct. We have been here before, haven't we? But I think the odds are for a ceasefire. And I think the first phase, all sides, basically the interests of all sides, converge to really bring about a breakthrough in the next few hours or next few days. And I think the new variable in the equation is the inauguration President Trump. President Trump has made it very clear he wants the war to end before next week, before his inauguration. And I think his envoy, Middle Eastern envoy, has been actively involved, coordinating with the Biden administration and using leverage with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So my take on it, I think this time is much more serious, and the momentum, there has been a great deal of momentum in the past few days.
Now, one of the sticking points in the past was the degree of permanence to a ceasefire, with Israel wanting an ability to go back in if they needed to, and Hamas saying no, it needs to move towards a permanent one. What's your take on how they've managed to resolve that?
Most important point, really, your question, this is it. You put your finger on the pulse of the problem. Hamas wants a comprehensive end to the war that has devastated Gaza and killed tens of thousands of Palestinians and displaced 2 million Palestinians multiple times. The Israeli Prime Minister and his coalition, they want a partial ceasefire. They want to get the hostages back home and then resume the war in a few weeks or few months. So that's why, I think the second phase is very tricky, because the question, will Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition really accept to end the war? Even though I would argue that they have achieved most of their goals in the sense of destroying Gaza, and Hamas has been weakened considerably. So the devil is in the details, and that's why Hamas has been dragging its feet, because they realize once the Israeli hostages go home, and they should go home today, not tomorrow, Benjamin Netanyahu and his coalition will be free to continue the war as they have done in the past 15 months.
You mentioned Mr. Netanyahu's coalition partners. We've had already Bezalel Smotrich, the Israeli finance minister, describing the emerging deal as what he called it a catastrophe for the national security of Israel, and said he wouldn't support it. Where does that leave Mr. Netanyahu if that flank of his party does decide not to support him?
Has been one of the major problems why Benjamin Netanyahu has been dragging his feet in the past 15 months, the collapse of his government. His political future is online. But the situation has changed. Even if two of his most radical extremist coalition leave the coalition, Netanyahu will likely survive. And the polls in Israel show that if elections were to take place in Israel, that Benjamin Netanyahu will be re-elected because many Israelis want their hostages back. So I take it, and he met with his coalition partners in the past few days trying to convince him of the deal, and he wants to give President Trump a gift because Trump does not really want to see the war, after he reaches the White House next week. So all in all, it seems to me Netanyahu wants to satisfy Donald Trump. Hamas wants to end the catastrophic nightmare of Gaza, and the United States, both Trump and Biden have been pushing very hard with the Egyptians and the Qataris, and that's why I think we might see a breakthrough in the next few hours and next few days.
And if there is a breakthrough, what is the future of Gaza? Because as you mentioned, it's largely destroyed and millions of people are displaced. How do you see the political future or the rebuilding effort going after this?
No, really, no one knows. You're talking about 70% of the infrastructure has been destroyed. All the universities, most of the schools, most of the hospitals, the cultural, fabric of Gaza. Where do you begin? You need several decades to really reconstruct Gaza. And how about the political future in Gaza, the morning after? So there are many, many questions. You have tens of thousands of tons of rubble. How do you really get rid of them? Not to mention the scars, the deep scars. You're talking about tens of thousands of Palestinians who have been killed, more than 100,000. It's a catastrophe. So even though, and I hope, basically a ceasefire is reached today, the reality of Gaza, the pain of Gaza, the loss, the suffering, the potential reconstruction of Gaza will be a very, very difficult, very complex process and will take decades, not just years.
Fawaz Gerges, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. Thank you.